Good evening, Trump's family. Welcome back to my channel. Have a good night, everyone, and God bless you. Alright, the following is a collection of news from Patriots. Let's get into the news. Trump just scored a major victory. The Guardian judge blocks Justice Department from Trump documents. Huge victory. CBS News judge denies DOJ request to regain access to some documents. And you look, ladies and gentlemen, and this is a huge victory for Trump. In terms of his battle with the Justice Department, the Guardian judge blocks Justice Department from Trump documents. Legal fight continues. What's a special master and why is Donald Trump asked for one in a Mar-a-Lago case? This is the Guardian. Well, a special master is now going to basically end of the criminal probe. So if you type in Trump criminal probe, CNN, you get the following: special master appointments reviewed documents, DOJ request to resume criminal probe rejected. Why is that important? They don't have anything on Trump. He didn't collude with the Kremlin. Number 1. He didn't do anything illegal with Stormy. Number 2. It was like he didn't pressure officials in Georgia. Number 3. He didn't engage in, civil crimes or corporate issues pertaining to his tax returns and businesses in New York. They didn't indict him. They're not going to in New York. So the New York criminal probe is pretty much done. Now, they tried Kinzinger. And Cheney tried in a couple of weeks ago, during the committee hearings regarding January. It was only about 2 months ago. We tried to overthrow democracy. It didn't work. Cheney Kinzinger lost that battle and Democrats lost miserably as usual when it comes to Trump and accusing him of everything under the sun. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about this special master appointed to review documents from the Mar-a-Lago search. DOJ resume criminal, DOJ request to resume criminal probe rejected. CNN. So the criminal probe has essentially ended for the time being. Not really a criminal probe, but just trying to gain as many that's trying to gain as much public relations support. It's a stunner political stuff, trying to gain as much political support as possible before midterms ain't gonna work. It's a really important short and it explains exactly why the Mar-a-Lago obsession. The classified documents obsession is complete and utter nonsense, simply a public relations stunt. And it looks like Lisa Murkowski is out there in Alaska telling Alaskans not to worry about what happened in Mar-a-Lago. They don't want to not dare question the FBI, says Lisa. She doesn't want Americans to question their government any longer. Just obey, listen and consume is all that they want. The Rhino, this deep state agent, who continues to sell off Americans and continues to tie with the communist within the Democrat Party, is now telling Alaskans not to question anything that the FBI is doing. The FBI needs to be dismantled. The FBI leadership needs to be arrested along with any agents who blindly follow their orders also need to be charged as well. And the DOJ needs to be deeply taken apart. And individuals within that system needs to be arrested as well. We can no longer continue to live in this nation, where we have these rogue entities out there working against the American public, against political opponents. It's absolutely disgusting that what we're currently seeing right now. And for somebody as an elected leader out of the Senate, is saying things like this should just send lots of red flags up. So we have midterms coming up, she's up for election, and she is having run against another individual, who is in the Republican Party, because they have that ranked choice voting now. And so the person who's been backed by Trump could win this, but they've set this thing up so that way the incumbent would remain in office, so we'll see how this goes. Here we got from Breitbart, Lisa Murkowski, Alaska, and should not question the FBI raid of Mar-a-Lago. 21-year incumbent Senator Lisa Murkowski said Alaskan voters should not question the FBI decision to raid the former President Trump's private residence at Mar-a-Lago. Speaking with All Due Respect podcasts of Andrew Harko, Murkowski said, "Where we are branding our law enforcement to the point where we are trusting our law enforcement." She rhetorically asked about the FBI raid, "Are we trusting those who are there to protect our citizens' history?" Murkowski failed to acknowledge a former president has never been raided by his political opponent in American history. Instead, she blamed many Republicans for condemning the FBI's action. "I'm talking about people before they knew a single thing, before they knew what was coming out at Mar-a-Lago. They had to make a decision about whether or not the FBI was once again on the rampage to bring somebody down, or whether or not Trump brought it upon himself. She said Murkowski then blamed Americans and not Biden's FBI for politicizing American society. Everything's becoming politicized. And when everything is politicized, and you have people that look at through the lens of red, blue, Republican Democrat shirts or skins, that's not a good place for American to be. Later in an interview, she said she would work with Democrats to pass many policies that are counterproductive to the American First movement. I'm working with them to advance things, she said in reference to Biden's massive federal spending packages, including the Biden's administration's inflation-fueling infrastructure bill. In the past few years, Murkowski has voted with Democrats 9 times. I'm not a fan of this regime administration, CSUN. I think that a lot of their policies have really hurt us, but you know what? They're in office and they're going to be in office for the next few years. Recent polling shows Murkowski is tied with Trump-endorsed Kelly Toshiba heading into the November midterm election, because she has promised not to help the Biden regime pass radical policies. If she was elected, we need a senator who will actually fight for Alaska, not bend to the will of the DC elites and support Joe Biden's energy, annihilating job-killing, gun-grabbing radical agenda at every turn. When I'm in the Senate, I will always stand up for Alaska and vote against the DC insiders. I really hope that Trump's candidate there in Alaska will beat her. We cannot afford have Lisa Murkowski in office once again, and working against America first, and working against America and itself, because any type of work with the B regime right now, and then, that is exactly what Lindsey Graham seems to be. Lindsey Graham, Joe Biden's best friend probably, who Joe Biden is referring to when he claims that he doesn't mean all Republicans with his inflammatory divisive rhetoric, only the MAGA kind, not the good Republicans. Joe Biden says probably thinking about Lindsey Graham at the back of his mind. But of course, Lindsey Graham is hardly a Republican now, is he? When I think about Lindsey Graham, especially now, I think about controlled opposition. Lindsey Graham is actively trying to sabotage Republicans ahead of the 2022 midterms. I mean, seriously, what is this guy thinking? You know what I think most Republican voters want from Lindsey Graham ahead of the election? Nothing, literally nothing. What Republican voters want from Lindsey Graham right now is very simply to just go away. But instead, what is Lindsey Graham doing? He's doing media tours saying completely ridiculous things. And now he's introducing new legislation at possibly the dumbest time imaginable, an extremely partisan piece of legislation that he knows is not going to pass. Literally, the only thing that this new Lindsey Graham bill does is motivate Democrats to get to the polls. It gives them a rallying cry to tackle their voter enthusiasm issue. There was no other way to interpret this other than Lindsey Graham sabotaging the Republicans ahead of 2022. Let me show you guys exactly what's going on and why I say that we've got some stuff to get into. So let's roll the tape. Alright, so you guys might be asking, what exactly did Lindsey Graham do? Lindsey Graham proposes 15-week abortion bill, dividing Republicans ahead of midterm elections. And now the conversation here is not around the actual content of the legislation. Lindsey Graham defends his actions by claiming that the bill represents the mainstream, which of course, I'm not disputing. We know the polling data. And we know that most people do not support this medical procedure after 15 weeks. We know that number to be 72%. Only 28% of individuals polled approve of this medical procedure happening after 13 weeks. Do I have an issue with Lindsey Graham's bill? Not exactly. I have some issues that I'll mention later. But that isn't even the topic of conversation here. Because the timing is completely stupid. You know what Republicans don't need right now? They don't need to be handing over messaging gifts to the Democrats 2 months ahead of the election. Of course, Democrats aren't going to delve into the details of this bill. And what it actually is they're going to say. Lindsey Graham and those ultra-mega Republicans are trying to ban abortion. Head to the polls. You have to vote to defend your rights against these ultra-mega Republicans. You cannot let them take hold of Congress. That is literally the only endgame here. That's the only ending to this bill, because clearly it's dead on arrival. What the hell is the point of presenting this bill? It does nothing. Republicans would need close to a supermajority in order to get this thing passed. It's about as likely to pass as codifying Roe v. Wade. It's not going to happen. You need 60 clean votes to pass this thing. And clearly, that is never going to happen. Lindsey Graham is trying to give the Democrats a lifeline for their messaging campaigns ahead of the next election. Why would he do that? The only reason he would do that is if he was actively working to sabotage Republican chances ahead of the next election. This is what I think Lindsey Graham is doing. He's pretended to be pro-Trump over the last 6 years, but at every single opportunity that he's had a chance to throw Republicans or throw MAGA Republicans under a bus, he's done. So anytime he's had an opportunity to betray Donald Trump, he's done so, and so clearly in an election environment where MAGA Republicans are basically taking over the party, and Lindsey Graham and his ilk are on the way out. He's angry, bitter and jealous, and trying to burn the whole thing down before his time in the Senate is done. There is absolutely nothing genuine about this bill. Some people are saying that Lindsey Graham is doing this because he wants to appear more conservative and lose the rhino tag, a completely stupid notion. Other people are claiming that Lindsey Graham is doing this in order to rally the pro-life base. Another completely idiotic take. We've covered the data, and we know where the issue of abortion stands after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Conservatives got their victory. Roe v. Wade has been deemed unconstitutional and it's sent back to the states where it belongs. That's enough of a victory for most Republicans. And just sticking on that alone. It's another point as to why Lindsey Graham is being completely disingenuous here, and really just exemplifies how much of a disaster this whole thing is, because Lindsey Graham is looking like a massive hypocrite right now, considering he said this a couple months ago. Lindsey Graham literally said there, "I've been consistent. I think that states should decide the issue of gay marriage and states should decide the issue of abortion." Then a couple months later, he proposes a bill showing that he's not being consistent at all, trying to enact a federal ban, forcing states to ban the procedure after 15 weeks. That is nothing but ammunition for the Democrats. One of the main points of the Republican argument against Roe v. Wade was the grievance over the fact that it was a federal law that was being forced onto states that didn't agree. The entire argument was that states get to decide their own laws, and that the federal government shouldn't be forcing California's values on Republican states. And now Lindsey Graham is saying, well, we're gonna force Republican values on Californians. It's completely inconsistent and totally hypocritical. He's now presenting himself as totally inconsistent to massive liar, a total hypocrite. And the worst part of all is that he's representing you ahead of an election. He's a mainstream Republican. And he's now inserting himself in the new cycle, giving the Democrats exactly the ammunition that they need. And there's just no way that I'm believing that Lindsey Graham is just doing what he thinks is right. Excuse me, but he is not that stupid. Lindsey Graham may be a whole lot of things, stupid as not one of them. This is a calculated decision to sabotage Republicans ahead of the next election. This is a calculated decision to give Joe Biden the ammunition that he needs to continue with his messaging campaign about the threat of ultra-MAGA fascist Republicans. This is Lindsey Graham trying to hurt Republicans ahead of the election in an effort to stop pro-Trump America First patriot Americans from getting elected. That is truly exactly what I believe. I mean, the Biden White House is already pointing out his hypocrisy during press conferences. This guy is totally unbelievable. And it shows exactly why it's so hard for Republicans to win elections, because not only do Republicans have to beat the Democrats, but they have to win against all odds with the media against them, and of course with their own party sabotaging the party's image and the party's chances. Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney. I mean, the list goes on and on. Nothing else needs to be said other than their names. I'm sure most Republican voters are thinking it's time for these people to go. And I almost forgot to mention Lindsey Graham also said this recently, I think last week, never trust these dirtbags. Lindsey Graham GOP senators slammed Trump's pardons for January 6 protesters as a bad idea. Say nothing about protesters in prison for over a year without a trial. Literally nobody asked for your opinion. Lindsey Graham, and at this point, I think it's time to just take a hike, go for a 2.5-month walk in Hillary Clinton's forest. And don't come back until after the election, please, I think is what most Republican voters are thinking. By the way, Lindsey Graham, the man who said that if we nominate Donald Trump as our presidential candidate, we're never going to win. Republican patriots don't need your help on how to win an election. They just need you to shut up and go away. Alright, thanks for being here folks, please receive a big hug from all of us. Let me know down below if you like